Kathy,
Hey, how are you?
how are you? Nice to see you.
Yes. Exciting times?
Our fruits of our labor about to come to fruition.
I know. I think so.
I trust.
think so. I hope so. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Kathy. See you. I've never seen you outside of
Outside of a board meeting.
well, actually, come to think of it, when you were running, when you, like when all the candidates were suspicious were running,
Oh, yeah?
I think that's one of them.
Okay.
But besides that, are you related to Oh. Yeah, I figured when I heard her name. MPs can't circulate. Oh, but they can support it.
Joe put that in.
No, I don't. Just the fact that yeah, obviously well, yeah, it's trying to yeah, I saw it at 3:30. Yeah, which is actually a large share of not by the whole.
Dark? Oh. But I really feel something. Before the Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not only am I that education reporter, but I'm also court reporter. So hopefully I won't.
So this is this maybe this is in 4 years first. So this one isn't even for you. Really? Is this one even for you? Your people? Where's my debate? Didn't want to back out. I'm curious about I'm not in it. Well, then why was she campaigning at mine?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sarah McKenzie, and I am the president of the Medicine Hat and District Chamber of Commerce. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Medicine Hat and District Chamber of Commerce Provincial Election Forum for the riding of Brooks Medicine Hat. We have several Chamber of Commerce directors joining us this evening. I'd like to welcome First Vice President Tracy Newlett, Treasurer Brett Pudwell, Past President Perry Deering, Directors Reagan Weeks, Guy Shatanis, and Sarah Franchetto. The Chamber is a nonpartisan organization representing over 800 active members ranging from one-person and home-based businesses to large corporations. And through these member organizations, we also represent a large part of the demographic by employee base. As such, we know in addition to our commitment to our members, we have a commitment to our community as well. As an established organization in this community since 1900, we take great pride in our responsibility to strengthen our region and our economy. As part of this role, we seek out answers, solutions to the questions and concerns of importance to our membership. Our goal for these forums is to provide the voting public with an opportunity to find out directly from candidates how they will represent their constituents on a variety of issues. We hope this provides you an opportunity to gain knowledge you need to make an informed choice when you cast your ballot. We would like to thank the candidates for spending time with us this evening and for articulating their vision and ideas for our community. I would like to now introduce our moderator, Ken Cobley. Ken has been president and CEO of the Alberta Chamber of Commerce since February 2005. Ken has developed the ACC's profile as a strong, consistent voice for Alberta business over the past 13 years, speaking for the Federation of Chambers of Commerce, which represent over 25,000 businesses in Alberta. Provincial, national, and international media regularly turn to the ACC for comment on business-related issues. Ken was born and raised in Medicine Hat. He has a background in accounting, serving as a member of the Provincial Board of the Certified General Accountants Association of Alberta, and as president in 1988-89. In recognition of his service, Ken was honored as one of the 100 CGAs who have made a difference. He is a recipient of the Queen's Golden Jubilee Citizenship Medal and was recognized as one of Alberta's 50 most influential people in 2016 by Alberta Venture Magazine. Ken spent 2 decades on the Municipal Council of the town of Beaumont and was mayor of the town for 12 years. He continues to live in Beaumont with his wife, Peggy, and has 4 children and 5 grandchildren. Welcome, Ken.
Well, thank you, everybody, and good evening. I was told by somebody in the crowd that last night's moderating was epic. I will try to live up. I'll try to live up to that standard. However, no promises. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to moderate tonight's forum. For disclosure purposes, the Medicine Hat District Chamber of Commerce contacted all registered candidates who appeared on the Elections Alberta website as of the official deadline set by Elections Alberta and invited them to participate in this forum. Here tonight are the 4 candidates who accepted the Chamber's invitation to participate. We'll be accepting written questions from the audience this evening. If you are submitting a question, please hold up your hand during the debate and questions will be collected by one of the Chamber Board directors who are standing around the theatre. The directors also have paper and pencil if needed. Questions will be reviewed by our scrutineers and submitted to me as your moderator this evening. We ask that any questions submitted be addressed to all candidates. Any questions that are specific to any one candidate will not be selected for this evening's forum. The questions may or may not be included into our program this evening at the discretion of the scrutineers and moderator, dependent on our time. We would like to remind the audience that there's no photography, audio, or video recording permitted at tonight's event, except for those who have requested prior permission. We also ask that you refrain from participating in the forum in any way other than quiet observation. Please hold any applause or comments until the end of the forum or unless invited to do so. And to be clear, if there's a spontaneous, a spontaneous show of support, that candidate's time will continue to run. So effectively, you're taking away time from the candidate. If there's a spontaneous protest against the candidate, I will reset their time and they'll be able to start again. This is for your benefit as we have a lot of information to get through this evening, and any interruption will lessen the time we have available to hear from our candidates. If you have a cell phone with you, please make sure that the ringer is turned off so that there are no interruptions that will distract from the questions of the moderator or answers of our candidates. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite the audience to join me in welcoming to the stage the 2019 provincial candidates for the riding of Brooks Medicine Hat. Firstly, Mr. Todd Beasley, Independent. Mr. Jim Black, Alberta Party. Ms. Michaela Glasgow, United Conservative Party. And Ms. Lynn McWilliam, Alberta New Democratic Party. Welcome, candidates. Before we begin tonight's debate, I would like to take a moment to explain the rules to which all of the candidates have agreed upon by signing the Chamber's Memorandum of Understanding. Each candidate in alphabetical order will have 1 minute to make an opening statement before we proceed into the question and debate portion of tonight's event. On the topics presented, each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to a question that would be asked to all candidates. Follow-up questions may be asked, which you will also have 1 minute to respond. Following the question and answer portion of each topic, I may open the floor to a maximum of 4 minutes of open debate, during which time no candidate may speak for more than 30 seconds consecutively, and they must be recognized by the moderator. Candidates must be given the floor by myself as your moderator this evening. In each instance where a candidate exceeds the permitted time for comment, I will interrupt and remind both the candidate and the audience of the expiration of the time limit by stating, "I'm sorry, candidate, your time is up." Finally, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement at the end of the program. This forum is structured in a manner that allows equal opportunity for all candidates to express their political views concerning our government's future plans and the effect they will have on business in our community and Alberta. While the order in which the candidates answer was randomly assigned, we have ensured that each candidate has an equal opportunity to give the starting response. None of the candidates have any advanced knowledge of tonight's questions, but they were given a list of potential topics that we will be discussing. The list of questions for tonight's debate are based on the Alberta Chambers of Commerce Vote Prosperity Pillars and Policy Issues, as well as questions submitted through the Chamber's membership and any questions that may be submitted on the floor this evening. So, before we get to the hot topics of the evening, each candidate will have 1 minute to deliver an opening statement. Mr. Beasley, we're going to begin with you.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's my absolute honor to be able to address the Chamber tonight and the people of Medicine Hat. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about as conservative as they can be. I knocked on about 200 to 300 doors for Jason Kenney in his recent by-election victory up in Calgary. I was one of the fellows that was manning the phones, getting the vote out to make sure that we were able to bring unification back to our society and make sure that we wouldn't have any issues that could somehow lead to another NDP government. I look forward to getting to know you in this community. At the end of the day, I'm running as an independent because I believe it's important that we have checks and balances in our democracy, and the best way to do that is to ensure effective Conservative opposition. I'm going to run on my record of 38 years of significant accomplishment for society. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you folks. I'll be knocking on doors over the next little while. We're going to be having some open houses. And please, when I come and knock on your door, give me 5 minutes. I think you're going to like what you hear. It's my pleasure to be here tonight, and on behalf of my colleagues, I know that we're honored, all of us, to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Black.
When I sat in front of here in 2015, I ran for the Alberta Party because what they said to me was they were looking for a party that has some sort of a middle point of view. One of the things that I liked about them was that they went to 3,200 Albertans, asked them what they were looking for in an MLA, and what they were looking for was the same thing that I was looking for. I was looking for someone who represented me up the line to the party as opposed to being a spokesman for the party down to me, and that's what engaged me in the first place. I also like the fact that we're not tied to any provincial parties or any federal party. We're not tied to any think tank. It's strictly about Albertans for Albertans, and that appealed to me. One of the things that I have that I can bring to the table is I had plenty of experience with board decision making. I sat on the Palliser Health Board for 7 years. I sat on the Children's Services Board for another 5. And in those times I sat on corporate committees. I have a broad range of experience in dealing with budgetary items, and I think I can bring that to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a good start. 2 of the 4 candidates have kept on time. You might be wondering why I'm constantly looking here. There is a computer screen down here, so both the candidates and myself can see their elapsed time as they're going through it. And next, Ms. Glasgow.
Thank you very much. So I just want to start off by saying thank you to everyone who made the time to come out here tonight and participate in our democracy. My name is Michaela Glasgow. I'm your local United Conservative candidate for the riding of Brooks Medicine Hat. I am very proud to run on my record. I am an accomplished political staffer. I have spent the last my adult life serving Conservative governments and holding entitled politicians to account. My most recent accomplishments being that I spoke in Ottawa in the House of Commons, as well as I spoke in front of a parliamentary committee where I was invited to attend. I truly believe that this election is about the economy, as does our Conservative Party. We have 3 pillars in this election. We need to get Albertans back to work, we need to make life better, and we need to stand up to Ottawa against the people who are against our interests. So I hope that I can earn your support on April 16th, and I hope that we can have a lively discussion and stay focused on the issues tonight.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Ms. McWilliam.
Hi there, I'm Lynn McWilliam, the NDP candidate in the riding of Brooks Medicine Hat. I'm a mom, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother, so I've got a lot of experience under my belt. I started working in politics in 1993 up in the Yukon when I worked for Audrey McLaughlin. And then I went to Ottawa and I worked on Parliament Hill for 15 years with various members of Parliament. So I'm very familiar with the political system. And when I left Ottawa, because I had an ill daughter, I had to find a place to live on retirement so that I would be able to support her and her family as well as myself. I am also a councillor for the town of Bassano. I'm in my 2nd term. So politics is right in my blood. I enjoy doing it. As far as our platform, we're dealing with health, we're dealing with education, we're dealing with getting people back to work, and we're dealing with seniors.
Okay, thank you. So now that we've heard from all the candidates, we're going to move on to the question and debate portion of tonight's event. We have structured our questions on 4 themes: business competitiveness, provincial trade, healthy communities, and government accountability. So the first topic is business competitiveness. This question is framed around the issue of regulation. In your opinion, how does regulation help or hinder business, and what provincial regulations are currently helping or hindering our business community? And we're going to start off with candidate Beasley. You have 60 seconds.
So I'm very honored. For the last 2.5 years, I'm the founder and I've led a program called Albertans for Affordable Electricity, Stop the Shock campaign. I've traveled to every community in this province doing my very best to educate the people on the need for competitive energy. Quite literally, it's a pillar of our society. I see earlier today that Greg Clark had a come to God moment, and he finally realized after a couple of years of the NDP fooling with our power grid just how important this is to our society. I'm not someone that's just talking about it. I've been actively going out throughout the province doing my very best to make this work. From a regulatory perspective, I say this out without reservation. We are over-regulated. It is costing us significant business. It's causing us harm to our competitive society. I've actually advocated to senior UCP insiders that we adopt a 3-to-1 rule. For every new piece of legislation, we get rid of 3 existing. When it takes us 8 months to get a well approved in the oil and gas industry, and it takes a week down in the United States, that tells us that we've got a significant problem in our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Black?
Well, the number one issue I've heard about in the last couple of days, in fact, when I checked my email tonight, I had 7 on this very issue of electric regulation as being an impediment to business. It isn't just an impediment to small business here in town. I'm hearing from the agriculture community that's a major irritant to their bottom line. And one of the issues that concerns me after I went to speak to the symposium on agriculture in Lethbridge about 2 months ago is I learned a few things I didn't know. And one of the things that I learned was we talk a lot about the energy sector having issues with employment, but agriculture year to date is down by 10%. There's been a loss of jobs in the ag industry, and some of the things they point to are some of these government regulations that Todd just referred to. The carbon tax has had an impact on them as well. They're free from market fuels on the carbon tax, but it's impacting their bottom line in other areas. And so I think we have to not just look at local business, we also have to look at ag business and look at that electric regulation for sure.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow?
Regulation is definitely one of the most burdensome things in our economy that's inhibiting our success. And since the NDP have formed government, $61 million 61% of oil sands investment has fled. We know that we need to scrap some of this onerous regulation that hurts our business producers. So we have actually proposed to have a Ministry of Red Tape Reduction, wherein if one piece of legislation that was coming in that was deemed to be a regulation, we would also take one out. That makes sure that we're not adding layers and layers of burden on the people who are already struggling to get by. In addition to that, we are also committing to scrapping 1/3 of existing regulations. We know that Energy East was killed by overregulation, and one of the regulations that we see that's actually been a failure of this government is failing to stand up to Bill C-69, which is known as the No More Pipelines Act. We've seen Rachel Notley flounder on this issue and fail to stand up for Albertans, even when our interests were threatened. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam?
The NDP have brought forward a proposal to have a one-stop shop for the energy sector. They are working with industry to develop this program, and they're hoping that they'll be able to get something to move along energy projects, but without hurting the environment and our health. We also are working to, with regard to Rachel going to, on Bill 69, she went to Ottawa to speak to the Senate about this. She has been working hard about this. She is not going to allow the federal government to interfere with how we produce our projects in this province. It's our resources, and we will work to make sure that they are ours, and we'll go ahead.
Thank you. So continuing on that theme, if elected, what would your party do to ensure the right balance of regulations? We're going to start off with candidate Glasgow first on this one.
To ensure the right balance of regulations, we need to make sure we're talking to industry professionals and stakeholders. So that's what we've been doing with our platform. If you've had a chance to look at it at albertastrongandfree.ca, you will notice that there has been an emphasis on deregulation, and we actually have a 120-page platform that is costed and checked out by major economists. So I would encourage people to look at that and make a decision for yourself about who is ready to lead this province on that regard. As far as regulation is concerned and the comments made made by my colleague here. You know, environmental standards, we are the leading environmental standards in the world for oil and gas production. We shouldn't be punishing the people who are trying to take our resources to market. People like my dad, my uncles, the people who work in this industry, and probably many of you in this room don't deserve to be burdened with regulation when you're just trying to get by.
Candidate McWilliam?
I don't think that regulations are necessarily a bad thing if it's good governance. We have to have controls over a lot of product. Now, the TMX is going to go through. I'm fully confident that that pipeline is going to go. And Rachel's crude to rail, on rail to get it to Tidewater, that's going to happen as well. We cannot allow this province to not be regulated. But we've got to make it more efficient. We've got to make it so that people will continue to prosper. And you know, I don't know if you read the story about Shell. They are leaving CAP. They're proposing to leave CAP because CAP is fighting the carbon tax. They're fighting climate change. They're fighting everything. Shell is leaving.
Candidate Beasley.
Yeah, I got to say this, folks. I've dedicated my career to creating superb environmental technologies. I've got over 22 method and apparatus patents for technologies that I've created that are vital, that have been installed into 5 of the world's continents. I've worked with the Saskatchewan government on the carbon capture and storage and enhanced oil recovery project. I made significant invention for that project that unlocked the technical and economic potential of it. I understand technology. I understand the motivation of its not only development, but the motivation of its adoption. I hope in my candidacy, and if I have the good grace of being elected in Brooks Medicine Hat, that I'm going to be able to go along and support 95+% of what the UCP proposes. But this is a perfect example of what we shouldn't do. The last thing that we need in our oil and gas industry is another bureaucracy, another ministry that is going to take money away from the frontline requirements that are necessary. We have more than enough administration in our oil and gas industry to be able to manage what's right and what's necessary.
Thank you. Candidate Black?
Well, I think one of the things that if you've taken the time to look at the albertaparty.ca website, I think you'll realize that we are a strong supporter of business in the province. I think one of the best things that we can do, and we talk about ourselves as being the party of the good idea, is you have to go and ask people what good ideas are. I think that's what we're prepared to do. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know every regulation that gets in the way of business, because I don't. But I do know businessmen who know what those regulations are, and we're more than willing to talk to those individuals to see what we can do to move forward. I noticed in the prosperity document here of the Chamber that they have a statement in there that I thought was really telling, given the experience I had sitting on a health board. It says, do no harm. And I think that's a good motivator for any government when they come into power, is to do no harm to small business, find ways to incent them, find ways to encourage them to find better ways of doing business themselves, and get out of the way and let them do their jobs, because they know best how to do these things.
Okay, thank you. We're going to open up this topic for further debate if there's interest amongst the candidates to get into this issue a little bit deeper. Do we have interest? Okay, looks like we have everybody on board. Okay, so, and again, to reinforce, each candidate has 30 seconds for the first go-round, and then we will do another rotation of 30 seconds again. And we're going to start off this run with candidate Glasgow, please.
Thank you. So I'd like to address a couple things in my short 30 seconds that I have going on here. First of all, oil by rail shipments, we know that that is actually the most unsafe way to transport oil and gas, which is why we need to actually put our money where our mouth is and get these pipelines built. Further to that, if we're talking about regulations, let's talk about the AER for a second, the Alberta Energy Regulator. What did Rachel Notley think was a good idea? She appointed Ed Whittingham, who is a known environmental activist who is anti-oil and gas. That does not seem like good governance. So this is a regulation that I think we need to scrap.
Okay, candidate McWilliam.
I think that you've got to find that you've got to have a balance on every board. You have to have labor, you have to have opposition, because that's how things work, and that's how things get better. As far as for the rail, if we can't get it by pipeline, and remember, Rachel's been in here 4 years. The conservatives, the progressive conservatives had 44 years. Mr. Harper in Ottawa couldn't get the pipelines going either. So it's
That's
not...
your 30 seconds. Candidate Beasley?
Alberta has nothing, absolutely nothing to apologize for environmentally. We've got some of the very best environmental standards in the world, period, full stop. I've read the Alberta Energy Utilities Act. I've read it twice. I tell you what, it is one heck of a read. What I know is this, is that we're having significant political interference in something that should not be politically interfered with by neophytes. We must create a whistleblowing set of legislation in this province that allows those regulators to do what's necessary in terms of governing what's necessary in our society.
Seconds.
Thank you.
Candidate Black?
I think a reference has been made to rail cars moving our product to market. I think one of the issues that we're dealing with right now is that we all want that pipeline. All of us in this room, I suspect, want that pipeline because it's not only is it good for Alberta, it's good in the national interest. But until those consultation processes have taken place and until we have a federal election, we really have to wait and put it in the hands of someone else other than ourselves. What we can do, though, is be encouraging and come up with ideas that can help bring that to fruition.
Thank you. And second round of debate, continue on with candidate Glasgow. Same rotation.
And if we're talking about crude by rail again, let's also remember that Rachel Notley paid way more than she needed to for those rail cars, proving just how much this government is bent on mismanagement and sending our province into more economic decline. When we're talking about regulations as well, we need to talk to the people who they are impacting, and that's why our platform is costed and has been discussed with experts across the board. This is a plan that is sure to work and put us back to balance by 2023.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam?
I really strongly feel that Rachel has done a very good job trying to get the pipelines going. She has been working, and we notice that Minnesota has agreed to allow the pipeline, so I think that's going to be going ahead. So we're getting it going. She has been working hard to get it done. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley?
You know, I've got to say, folks, this isn't a consultation issue. It's been very clear that the reason these pipelines aren't built is, quite frankly, because we've got a Quebec first, Canada second Prime Minister. The federal government has the authority to approve these pipelines, whether there's provincial opposition or not. We should have no illusions that right now the reason we're not rocking and rolling in our society is because we've got, again, a Quebec first, Canada second Prime Minister that is choosing the economic interests of Quebec over Alberta. We all need to ask ourselves, is this acceptable? I personally believe Confederation is broken. This generation needs to fix it, and we've got some tough decisions to make in this society.
Thank you. Candidate Black?
Well, one of the things that you'll notice about our party is that we do try to come up with good ideas. And one of the things that we've discussed, and I don't know if you noticed in the media yesterday, but a railway through Alaska to Tidewater is something we've been discussing with the governor of Alaska. And believe it or not, he's actually inclined to support us on that initiative. And I think looking at those sorts of alternative ideas is actually good for stimulating solutions to this long-term problem we have of getting our product to market.
Thank you, candidates. We're going to move on to the next question. We're going to continue with the topic of business competitiveness, but this time with a focus on the environment. The question is, what are your views on climate change? How does your party platform address this issue? And if it does, what policies and strategies does your party suggest to effectively deal with climate change? And we're going to start off with candidate McWilliam on this one.
Climate change is here, and it is real. We have brought in the carbon tax, which has, at this moment, we've decreased our carbon emissions by 7 megatons, and that is actually 1/3 of the amount of carbon emissions that Manitoba gives out yearly. In the 4 years, we have reduced it by 7 megatons. It is important that we realize that we get the carbon tax going. We have also worked to have alternative energies or renewable energy, and that's going to be very helpful to reduce the carbon emissions. It's also a renewable resource. We have to realize that oil and gas is not renewable, and we have to realize also that we have to work at trying to get a balanced economy. When the oil and gas has its hills and troughs, yes, when we're up here.
Thank you. Candidate Black, 60 seconds.
We're talking about an issue with our economy that's on the minds of everyone. I think, like I would consider myself a moderate environmentalist, but when you go out and talk to people in the community, particularly in the agriculture business and business itself, we tout ourselves as a party that listens to constituents. And what constituents have told us is that the carbon levy at this time is not a good idea. It's impacting the bottom line for business, it's impacting the bottom line for agriculture. And as a result, we're seeing unemployment rates that in the agriculture area, frankly, I find quite troublesome. So I think we can make a really good case to the federal government, because I know that federal legislation is hanging over our head, but I think we can make a good case to at least put a moratorium on the carbon levy in the short term until our energy economy comes back. Give people a break now, let them hire people for jobs and move our economy forward that way, and let this thing play out in the courts, as I'm sure it will.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
So to address environmental concerns, United Conservative Party, within our platform, we have a common sense conservation plan. I know that speaks to me as I am a hunter, so I'm a big fan of the outdoors and using my time there wisely, and also being able to enjoy that land and for the next generation. One thing we're doing that is tangible and will reduce emissions is the TIER program, so technology, innovation, and emissions reduction. So the first $100 million collected from the TIER program will go towards innovative technologies, which we know that in Alberta we excel at. I was very fortunate to work for the MLA Drew Barnes for 3 years while he had the energy portfolio. We spent time in Calgary meeting with all sorts of people in the petrochemical industry as well as the oil and gas sector, talking about ways that they are innovating, and they're doing it. They don't need to be told what to do, and they don't need their hand held. They're doing a fantastic job already, and we should be proud of the work that they do.
Thank you. And finally, Candidate Beasley.
I had the honor, ladies and gentlemen, of addressing Parliament. The head of the Canadian Environmental Protection Agency is an expert in a field of science referred to as gas treating. I was also asked on behalf of the Government of Canada to testify before the U.S. Department of Energy on energy environmental technology strategies. Ladies and gentlemen, we can never forget where we live. We live within a couple of 100 miles of the most competitive economy on the planet. They have no intentions of adopting carbon taxes, levies, fees, whatever the heck you want to call it. All this does is harm our society for absolutely zero environmental gain. I will not advocate $1 spent on environmental technologies. I will advocate for fixing pollution problems. At the end of the day, this narrative of global warming, there is not 1 ounce of proof behind it. At the end of the day, let's remember what the United States is doing. What they are doing is they are in fact bringing a science-based evaluation, not
Your time's up. Okay, I'll just remind the crowd, if we get into issues where a candidate is interrupted, I will reset his time, okay? So let's be clear, no it's not, because you still had a little extra time that I gave you, and we're also making up for the last question you ran over a bit on time, so it's give and trade. However, for those of you that didn't get enough time, we're gonna open up this topic to debate. Everybody cool with that? All right, we're gonna start off with the same order of speaking. Remember, you get 30 seconds in this debate, and we'll come around a second time. We're going to start off with candidate McWilliam. You have 30 seconds.
Okay, well, again, climate change is real. We have to deal with it. All you have to do is look to the North Pole. It's thawing out. We have worked with the alternative energy sector to try and get renewable energy going. We are trying to diversify the economy to make sure that we have jobs for the future. We've got to move forward. We cannot continue to move back. Like I say, Shell, they have decided that they're going to leave.
Thank you. Candidate Black.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I am a moderate environmentalist, and I understand that there are issues around this, but in the short term, we have people that need jobs, we have people that need employment, and those individuals can't be the ones that we carry on the back of dealing with this issue. I'm not opposed personally to a carbon levy, but not at this time. I think we can put a moratorium on it. I think we can wait till the energy economy bounces back, and then maybe that's the time to take a look at this carbon levy. I'm not in dispute about global warming.
Okay,
I think there's all kinds of...
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
I I think a really important thing to point out here is that the carbon tax does absolutely nothing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. All it does is displace emissions, and further to that, it takes $1.4 billion out of our economy every year. When we're talking about the carbon tax, we need to be cognizant of the fact that this is not a tax on emissions. This is a tax on everyday people, on driving your kids to school, on going to church, on going to hockey practice. This is a tax on heating your home in the coldest months out of the year. So I do not buy this rhetoric that the carbon tax reduces emissions, and you shouldn't either.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
Here, Michaela. I got to tell you what this is. I mean, if you would have paid attention a couple of years ago, the NDP made it clear that the carbon tax in Alberta was a wealth redistribution scheme. We have an obligation to the weakest members of our society. That is ironclad. It is absolutely unequivocal. But this is not the way to do it. Harming our economy, harming jobs, harming competitiveness is wrong. Canada needs to quit Paris. What we need to do is we need to realize who we are, where we are in the world, and the fact all this does is cause harm.
Thank you.
I stand against that.
Thank you. We're going to go around for another round of 30 seconds. Candidate McWilliam.
If we don't stop and the emissions, if we don't stop polluting our air, if we don't stop if we don't get this under control, there will be nothing left. We have to deal with it. Like I say, the north is melting. The ice caps are melting. Greenland is melting. Friends of mine in the Yukon, their buildings are sinking because the permafrost is melting. It is here. It has to be dealt with. And if we don't do it, who is going to do it?
Thank you. Candidate Black.
One of the issues I have is that for some reason Canada, with less than 1/2% of the world's population, is being pounded on to do something about the environment, and I don't think that's realistic. I think one of the things that we have to look at is that we need a base energy supply. It's not going to come from wind, and it's not going to come from solar. If you looked at that last cold freeze, 10,000 megawatts of power in Alberta, 318 came from other sources besides natural gas-fired turbines and coal-fired turbines.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
So the first bill of a United Conservative government will be to scrap the carbon tax. We know that it's a job killer. We know that it does absolutely nothing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we know that it hurts regular, everyday people. The Sundre Senior Centre was almost forced to close because of their carbon tax bill. I know that I took a lot of flack for it, but I did point out that my church also suffered from a carbon tax bill. I don't apologize for that. I apologize for how the comment was repeated, but we do need to be very cognizant of the impacts of the carbon tax.
Thank you. And finally, Candidate Beasley.
There's not 1 ounce of factual data that's showing that we're having global warming. In fact, data is showing the opposite. I got to say this, both the UCP and the Alberta Party are making statements that they intend to get rid of the carbon tax, except for one thing. They intend to keep the carbon tax for large emitters. It says somewhere between $100 and $500 million that will be pulled out of our heavy industry. As far as I'm concerned, that money is better spent in industry, churning through our economy, putting ourselves to work, supporting service companies, supporting hotels, supporting wage earners.
All right, let's move on to question number 3. That was a spirited debate. Thank you, candidates. Provincial trade. What strategies do you believe would help overcome interprovincial regulatory issues and get Alberta's natural resources to market? Why do you think these strategies would be effective? And we're going to start off 60 seconds. Candidate Black.
But when I looked at the prosperity document of Chamber of Commerce, to be totally honest with you, I did not know until we started having the beer and wine wars that there was such a thing as a barrier to interprovincial trade. I must admit my ignorance there, because I thought that, you know, within the boundaries of Canada, we traded frequently. I've since tried to educate myself a little bit, and one of the ideas that came up through the Chamber that I would fully support is that we need to get together and come up with some sort of a free trade agreement between the provinces of Canada so that we don't have barriers to business. And if there's a good business in Saskatchewan that can benefit us, open up the borders. If we have the same thing, and with our competitive edge here in Alberta, I think we'll do very well that way, then open up some barrier, get rid of some barriers that interfere with trade interprovincially. But this is a file that I have to admit to you that I'm pretty naive on. I didn't even know we had such barriers in
Thank
Canada.
you. Candidate Beasley.
Well, one of the things I do like about what the UCP is proposing is a corridor that would go through Canada that would allow us to have pre-approved pipelines, pre-approved transport. I believe it's absolutely crucial that we have our fellow supposed brothers and sisters in Canada recognize that we're all in this together. It's not a case of Alberta against Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Ontario or Quebec. We have to ask ourselves, are we Canadians or not? We need politicians that are going to stand up and demand the answer to those questions. I mentioned this earlier. The federal government has full authority to approve the pipelines, and they're choosing not to over the economic interests of Quebec against the West. This has been going on since the Plains of Abraham, ladies and gentlemen. Many in this room, I see some gray hair. We remember the NEP program, the devastation that caused the West. All we're seeing right now is more of the same. We sincerely have to ask ourselves, are we as a society going to continue to accept this? Are we going to demand our rights? And at the end of the day, are we prepared to do something about it?
Thank you.
am.
Candidate McWilliam.
With the interprovincial trade, I think one of the things that Rachel has been doing is working with the federal government to try and get our long haulers to be regulated right across the country instead of having it going from Calgary to Manitoba, especially those B trains, which are quite large. I think that will certainly allow traffic. It'll certainly allow product to go between provinces. The other thing that she's working on is upgrading our long, high-load corridors, i.e. 36, and working on 41 to try and upgrade that so that the long-haul products can get up there. The big products get up to Fort McMurray or wherever because we don't have enough. And, you know, I think that will help with a lot of allowing product to get out of Alberta and allowing product. The other thing we have to do is get Wildhorse border crossing open more than 8 hours a day.
Thank you. And finally, candidate Glasgow.
So the absolute best way we're going to get things moving through Canada is to elect a new Prime Minister in October. But we need to make sure that we have a coalition of premiers and provinces ready to fight for our interests and fight for the interests of our energy sector. We have that right now. In fact, the United Conservative Party has filed as an intervener in the carbon tax court challenge and is proposing to fight the federal government in court again if they continue to oppose our interests.
Okay, thank you, candidates. We're going to do a follow-up question on this regarding natural resources. How will your party reduce reliance on royalty revenues? We're going to start off with candidate Beasley.
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to get our oil and gas industry rock and rolling again. I mean, I think we need to increase revenues. I think we need to increase revenues in a significant way. Every oil-producing jurisdiction in the world is full steam ahead, but Alberta's not. We need to ask ourselves, why not? That revenue, we should be up $20 or $30 billion in revenue in this province. Some of the challenges that we're facing are not market-driven, they're politically driven. And again, we need to ask ourselves, are we going to continue to accept this? I do believe that we need to diversify our economy. I'm working for the Center for Crop Diversification outside of Brooks, and what we're doing is we're putting together what we hope is significant initiatives with the Medicine Hat College, where what we'll ultimately do is we will bring in genetics from other parts of the world that are high value for our farmers, build processing infrastructure, and teach a brand new class in school the ability to go ahead and get out of perhaps an oil-based economy. But make no mistake, the revenue that we've got from oil and gas, it is going to be the most important in this province for the foreseeable future, and we better fight for our rights. I promise to do that if you elect me.
Candidate McWilliam.
Royalty revenues, there was, as you know, there was a review that started in 2015 to see if we had to change our revenues, our royalty revenue. And it was determined that at this time we would leave it because our industry is in dire straits and they just needed to have that little bit of relief. But I want to say to people that there is a lot of oil and gas activity happening. I spoke to the mayor of Wembley, which is 25 minutes west of Grand Prairie. They don't have enough workers up there. They don't have enough oil and gas workers. They cannot fill the positions. So there is oil and gas work happening. In Consort, Alberta, they don't have a hotel, motel, house for sale, house for rent, because there is so much oil and gas activity happening. TransCanada Pipeline, they've had information sessions here in Medicine Hat to try and locate primary contractors and secondary contractors to do the work on pipelines. It's happening.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
So the United Conservatives are proposing bold and decisive action to reignite our economy and bring back the Alberta advantage. We're actually proposing a corporate tax cut from 12 to 8% over 4 years. This has been costed by economists, and we know that this will create 55,000 new jobs in the province of Alberta. We know that jobs, the economy, and pipelines are the most important things going on here in Alberta and the most important issues. I've been blessed to have time to door knock, and I do that for about 6 hours a day on average. And I can tell you that these are the issues that come up at the doors. The statement made by my colleague here that there are an abundance of oil and gas jobs is categorically false. We know that we have a very big deficit here in Alberta, and especially in Medicine Hat. If you drive around, there are for sale signs everywhere, and that's because people are desperate. They're looking for ways to find a livable income, and they're looking for an ability to get by. We know that the average income is actually down in Alberta by $6,000 since the NDP has, $4,600, let me correct myself, since the NDP has come in.
And finally, Candidate Black.
Well, if small business and medium business are the backbone of an economy, I mean, our party's the party you want to take a look at. Not only are we considering a reduction of the corporate tax over a 4-year period, but we also propose $100 million be invested through the ATB and for the AIM Corporation to provide venture capital and startup money for small business. Because we believe, and I believe this myself, is that we're only going to diversify from within. We can't wait for somebody from outside to come and diversify our economy. We have to do it from within. I've never run a small business, but I've always believed in the importance of small business. And years ago, as principal of Dutchess School, I found some money through the federal government called the Rural Entrepreneurship Program. It was very successful. I had a number of businesses in Brooks got involved with that. But 2 years later, the provincial government found out about it and cut the money off from those businesses through the STEP fund if they continued to accept federal money from our program. And so that program died. But I think we should be teaching more entrepreneurship in schools, I think.
Thank you. Just a reminder, anybody that wants to submit a question from the floor, we have chamber volunteers out there that have pen, pencil, paper. Just raise your hand, they'll come to you, okay? Next question. Next topic concerns healthy communities. Sorry? Healthy communities with a focus on education. Our question to the candidates is, do you believe Alberta students are being adequately prepared for today's workplace? Why or why not? We're going to start off with candidate Beasley.
You know, I got to tell you, I'm a youth mentor, and I'm just absolutely honored with this. I'm on the Wall of Fame at my local high school in Brooks, and what it comes down to is some of the teachers that I've met are absolutely exceptional. What we got to recognize is that the children that are coming through our education system in this day and age are going to be faced with some of the most competitiveness in our society. It will be a global world. It's crucial that we teach objective thought, that we give our teachers, who are some of the most exceptional out there, the tools to do what's necessary. At the end of the day, we must create a society that can think for themselves, that aren't indoctrinated for any particular strategy that somebody might have. Those students are our future. We must give the frontline teachers their full advantage. And one of the things on the discussion trail, when I'm out knocking on doors and I talk to teachers, they say for all the bluster of the NDP, they've actually been withdrawing support for frontline services in terms of teachers' assistance. I would advocate that we put those resources back in right away. The Alberta party is at, oh, there's not enough time.
Thank you.
I could go
Candidate
on.
Glasgow. I'm sure you could go on. Candidate Glasgow.
So we know in education that the NDP have spent a lot of money trying to fix the system. However, what we have seen is that even though, despite putting more money into the system, class sizes have not actually gotten smaller, and that's not from us, that's from the Auditor General, who's a completely nonpartisan entity. So the problem here isn't necessarily funding, but and making sure that students are adequately prepared. We believe that when we're getting students to be adequately prepared, it means that they need to be able to find jobs in today's economy. And youth unemployment is actually higher than it's been in a long time here in Alberta. So what we're encouraging is that we need to expand the scope of education beyond an academic education, include things like trades. One of the smartest people I know, I'm a little biased, I think, is my dad, and he doesn't have an academic education, but he is successful. And we need to embolden people who maybe don't excel in the academics of school, or maybe that's not what they're interested in, but they're really good with their hands. They want to build things, they want to contribute to our economy in a different way, and we need to support them in that endeavor.
Candidate Black.
Well, as a teacher, I've been teaching now for 47 years, and I always thought my role was to prepare students for post-secondary. I'm a believer that a high school diploma is the key that opens many, many doors, and those doors are things like apprenticeship programs, a certificate at college, university degree, if you will. So I've always looked at it that way. One of the things that I've always been a strong advocate of is that second, third chance. And as a principal in Brooks, I started the outreach school in Brooks to give students a fourth or fifth chance, like I got when I was in high school. Mr. McIntosh, for whatever reason, gave me that fourth chance that got me past being that brain-dead teenager and on to a university degree and became a teacher. So in my view, the role of education is not to prepare students for the workplace, it's to prepare them for the training they're going to get when they go to college. They go out on an apprenticeship program, they go work with a carpenter, they go out in the oil patch and learn how to run a drilling rig. My job as a teacher is to get them a high school diploma.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
In the fall, there's going to be 15,000 new students entering into our education stream. Rachel has promised to increase teachers by 1,000 and support staff to help the teachers with a lot of the paperwork that happens as a teacher. We are also going to update the curriculum, and we are going to work with the trades. We also have put a tuition freeze on college and university to allow students to go in and be able to afford their university and not come out with a massive amount of debt. We are going to ensure that every student has a good education. If they want to continue working in the trades, they will have the ability to do so. If they want to continue on to the university, they will be able to afford to do so, and that is a promise. And in 2015, Rachel did put back the Conservatives' reduction of education.
Follow-up question on this topic. Where do you see room for improvement in today's education system? So where do you see room for improvement in today's education system? We're going to start off with candidate Glasgow.
Okay, so room for improvement. I am a very happy. I mean, I have many people in my family who are teachers, and I really respect the work that they do. Full stop. One thing that we can do to improve our education system, though, is empower people to make decisions for their children through choice in education. And a United Conservative government would encourage choice in education by passing the Choice in Education Act. The Choice in Education Act emboldens parents to be able to make decisions for their children. Also, we know that choice in education actually helps our public school systems as it puts people in different places. As well, I know that there has been a major attack on our faith-based schools here, and even there's a school in the riding that's suffering, Newell Christian School. I was very happy to attend their fundraiser in the last couple of months here, and I'm a firm advocate for choice in education because I truly do believe that parents know what best to do with their children, not politicians.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
I strongly believe that we need to have a strong public education system in this province. And we've got to be inclusive. We've got to have understanding for our students. We have a very diverse, especially in Brooks, there's a very diverse group of students in the schools that need a lot of help. And I think we have to continue to do that to prepare them for Canadian society. There are a lot of immigrants in Brooks, and they need the help. I also feel very strongly that allowing people to continue with their education as they see fit is very important as well. We also have had discussions on GSAs in the schools, and I think those are important to make every student in every school feel safe in our province, and it's very important for them to have that as well.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
I'm honored. Tomorrow morning I'm going over to the local high school in Brooks, and I get to speak to the grade 9 class about politics and about the reasons I'm up on the Wall of Fame. You know, the number one thing we can do with students these days is we can inspire them. We can encourage them that great things can happen with their life. When you're that age, we all remember it. We were a little unsure of ourselves. And what I find is that if we could provide the resources to the frontline teachers and ensure that it's there, that they don't have to question whether it's going to be there for 6 months or for a year, but it's going to be there unequivocally. If we can reduce classroom sizes, I tell you what, I think we can get great things out of our education system. I meant what I said earlier. It is going to be a tough old world out there, and we had better create the next generation so they can think for themselves, that they can think objectively, and they can compete. Those are the ones that are going to be paying for our old age pension checks, and we better get it right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Candidate Black?
Well, in times of tight economy, I think if you want to put your resources where they're going to do the most good, you've got to put more supports in the primary grades, grades 1 to 3, and providing more educational assistance is helpful, some mental health initiatives, because right now in this province, sadly, as good as we are, we still have a dropout rate of 1 in 4. Only 75% of our students graduate from high school. And as I said to you earlier, I believe the high school diploma is the key that opens many, many doors. So put your resources there so you can get the supports for those kids. Because the data is still there. If a child, and particularly a boy, has difficulty reading at the grade 3 level, their chances of graduating from high school are almost nil. And that statistic's been there for 40 years, and we still need to find ways to make sure we have the supports in primary grades to make sure those kids don't fall through the cracks and they get their high school diploma. So in times of tight budgets, that's where you need to put your money.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to stay still on the general topic of healthy communities, but we're going to go on to healthy communities with a focus on health care. And the question is, how would your party ensure quality health care is available for all Albertans? And we'll start off with candidate McWilliam.
With who?
McWilliam.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. As you know, the NDP have worked very hard with the healthcare. We've invested a lot of money in nurses. We've invested a lot of money in trying to get in modernizing hospitals, building new hospitals, working to get things done in that capacity. I think it's important that we have health. Everybody should be able to walk into an emergency room and get taken care of. We're also investing more money in surgeries, in particular cataracts, heart, and cancer treatment. We are building the new cancer treatment center in Calgary, and it's going to be a one-stop shop, so you don't have to go all over Calgary to get your different treatments. It's all going to be done in one spot, and I think that is really important as well. We also have refurbished a hospital in Red Deer. We've done one in southern Edmonton. So we will continue. As you know, you've got a lovely new refurbished hospital here in Medicine Hat. And
thank you. Candidate Black.
Well, I don't know if I have the answer for the province, but I know I think I have the answer for Southeast Alberta. I was elected to sit on the Palliser Health Board back in the days when we made local decision making. And one of the things that you can do when you make decisions locally is you can decide if you're going to upgrade the laundry at the hospital here and not let it sit for 15 years so that it becomes redundant, and then you send your laundry to Lethbridge. We were always under pressure. We were always under pressure to do something outside of our area. But because we were a strong board and we believed in local decision making, we were looking in the best interests of our people, our residents here in South Alberta, we made decisions locally that were in the best interest of patients here. If anybody in this audience can come and tell me that the healthcare in Southeast Alberta is better today than it was in the days of the Palliser Health Board, I'd like to hear from you, because I don't see it. We've lost all autonomy. Decisions are being made in Edmonton in our best interest. That's not the way we should be doing things. In fact, I don't even want decisions made in Lethbridge in our interest.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
So here we have another example where the NDP actually put more money into healthcare system, but it didn't create better outcomes. So what we've proposed is a healthcare guarantee, which we signed on a large Bristol board, stating that we would maintain or increase healthcare spending. This is to protect frontline workers. That is our ultimate goal. Within 30 days, we also do realize that lots of our healthcare is bloated. We spend a large chunk of our budget every year on healthcare, and we do not see better results for patients. Wait times have gone up under the NDP, and actually in reference to the Medicine Hat Hospital, to our knowledge, not a single bed was actually put in from that refurbishment. So we have money that's going in the wrong place here, and we need to make sure that we're launching a full review of Alberta Health Services so we can best serve patients.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
You know, the big concern that I've got about our healthcare system right now is, quite frankly, I think we've got a heck of a pile of money that's going into it, but what we've got is one huge efficiency problem. When we hear of managers managing managers, there's too much money going into the top end of our health system. I believe in speaking to experts when I'm not a doctor, but I have consulted with a significant number of those that are on the front line, and I've asked them the question, what's it going to take to fix this? I'm sorry, Ms. McWilliams, I mean, what I've heard is that the NDP has just created problems in healthcare. In Bazzano, for example, we've got an extended healthcare system and they need a new hospital in that area. The funding is available and yet they can't seem to get approval from the NDP to have it go forward. In Brookson area, we've had wards shut down where we've had a significant increase in the number of people coming to our community. That's unacceptable. I heard somebody refer earlier about the emergency room access. Well, that in itself, there needs to be accountability. We have people using the frontline emergency as something that could be done in the clinic.
Okay, so we're going to open this one up to debate for obvious reasons. I'm sure everybody wants to get in on this. We're going to start 30 seconds again, and we're going to do a second round of 30 seconds. So starting with candidate McWilliams.
If you think that our healthcare system is not working, first, I think you're wrong. And second, with the corporate tax cuts that Mr. Kenney is trying to do, we'll lose $4.9 billion, $4.5 billion in our budget. And you know what's going to be cut first, and is always cut first. That's education, healthcare, seniors. That is how it always works. And we want to make sure that that does not happen.
Thank you. Candidate Black.
Well, as I've said, local decision-making for me is the answer. If you give us the funds we need to do the things we need to do in our region, we'll get it done, as we did when we were Palliser Health Region. The Bassano Hospital was on our radar 12 years ago to be refurbished. It still hasn't happened. Michaela talks about the beds here in this rebuilt hospital. When we put the original plans together, there was plenty of new beds to be made, but when that decision got made in Edmonton, and the final decision was money, we lost a lot of what we had in that plan.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
It's really interesting to me that we defy basic economics and say that a corporate tax cut won't help Albertans. What that does is that creates jobs. When we lower corporate taxes, we're inviting investment back into Alberta that has been lost under this government. So actually, a corporate tax cut will create jobs. And like I've said before, there's more fear-mongering coming from the NDP, which is what we've seen in the last 2 weeks of this campaign so far. We are not going to cut healthcare. We're not cutting education. We are empowering our frontline workers, and we're reinvesting in our economy.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
Well, what it comes down to, just to finish my thought, I think we were talking about healthcare. You know, what I'm hearing from the doctors in the emergency room is that there's people that go to the emergency room that don't need to go there. At the end of the day, they've got a sore back or a sore knee, and they could just as easily go to their clinic on a Monday or a Tuesday afternoon. What they're recommending is quite literally accountability in access. Perhaps a $5 user fee. It would make people think, do I really need to go and take up space in the emergency room, or can it wait till Monday morning?
Thank
if
you.
It's truly...
Candidate McWilliams.
Again, set that clock. It's showing time that isn't there.
Up 2 minutes. It comes up 2 minutes. You had 30 seconds. I'm moving on to the next candidate.
Corporate cuts, tax cuts do not work. In 2015, I ran federally for the NDP, and I had an article, and I've got it updated to 2018, where federally there's over $500 billion in money hoarded since 2000 and 2010, and I think that corporations are not reinvesting. The IMF said they're not reinvesting. Conference Board of Canada.
Thank you.
Same.
Moving on to candidate Black.
Well, again, I'm going to go back to my experience on the Palliser Health Board. Is back in the days when we were making local decision making, we had the process. We didn't close beds in the summer like most hospitals did because we managed our budget very well. We had a reserve, and we could afford to hire intern nurses over the summer to keep beds open. And that's a perfect example of how you maintain positive health care over time by using the resources that you have with decisions that are made locally in the best interest of health care in your region.
Candidate Glasgow.
Because of our belief in a corporate tax cut bringing investment back to Alberta, we have the ability to be able to serve quality and give quality, proper care and universal access to healthcare in Alberta. We know that because wait times have gone up, we need to do something about that. Our neighbors in Saskatchewan, it's called the Saskatchewan Surgical Initiative, found a way to actually reduce wait times. And before, we know right now, actually a constituent messaged me about this, that we wait way too long for initiatives, and also we have the Saskatchewan Surgical.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
So at the end of the day, I believe firmly that there's, maybe with the exception of Mr. Black, that not many of us are truly experts in this area. I believe firmly that what we need to do is consult with experts. What we need to do is we need to give them a mandate, and we need to let them do their job. At the end of the day, I do believe that we've got significant operational efficiency improvements that can be made, and I believe that money can be redirected to the front line, so we may be able to have our cake and eat it too. Have the same level of relative cash going into it, and have a significant improvement in services.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to healthy communities with a focus on infrastructure. And the question is, transportation and utility corridors combine transportation and utility infrastructure, such as the Calgary and Edmonton ring road systems. Where do you see opportunities for future transportation utility corridors? And we're going to start off with candidate Black.
Well, when you're talking about how we can help the economy, I think one of the things that we need to look at in terms of infrastructure, because I've heard from a number of farmers in the rural area, there's some real issues around bridges in rural Alberta, because they were never meant to carry the loads that they're carrying now. I think something that's looming and hasn't been talked about too much lately is that we're going to end the Municipality Sustaining Initiative allotments here in 2021, and I think that's going to have a huge impact on municipalities. You're going to go from, example, we'll use Brooks as an example, you're going to go from $5 million a year to be put towards infrastructure. You're going to drop that down to be sharing $50 million throughout the rest of the province, outside of Edmonton and Calgary. They're going to get $250 million each. The rest of the province is going to get $50 million, and that's not going to help with infrastructure problems. That's not going to be a support for municipalities when they deal with issues like declining bridge structures and having to build highways and fill in potholes. So we need to maintain the MSI, I think.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
You know, one of the things that is absolutely illustrative of the need for representation in this area that is independent, that can speak outside of the party system, quite frankly, is the money in infrastructure that's going to the cities. And there will always be a priority because that's where the votes are. If we look at the Green Line in the city of Calgary and the amount of money that's going into that, I think, quite frankly, the number of people that are going to be served by it, is that really in the best interests of Alberta? Or is it just in the best interest of Calgary? I'm sorry, at the end of the day, this is a big province. There's a lot of demands. The cupboards are bare, and we need to look at those things. I will say it again. We need to have politicians that are going to be able to stand up and speak on an unwhipped basis and fight for the rural communities, because it isn't just Calgary and Edmonton where it all comes down to it. Nationally, I absolutely support Mr. Kenney in his desire to have a national corridor that doesn't require or have the bureaucracy to allow things to happen. Interprovincial trade, that's crucial. Are we Canadians or not?
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
I think that I've mentioned before about the high wide load corridor that is that the NDP are working on right now as we speak. They've started on 36. They're going to increase transportation on Highway 41. They are going to put a new highway out of Fort Mac so that they don't have the congestion that they had during the terrible fire that happened out there, and it also will allow product to be distributed throughout the province. Also, we have to, as a councillor, I understand the MSI. I'm trying to work with a budget that, you know, we don't know. We've never had a steady amount of money, and it wasn't just the NDP, it was also the Progressive Conservatives. One year we'll have a certain amount, the next year we'll have another. I know the NDP have proposed that they will work and create funding for municipalities that are going to be steady and reliable throughout.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
We acknowledge that different communities have different needs, and I actually do want to agree with Jim Black on this and his point for local decision making. We know that the best decisions are made at the local level, which is why MSI is so important. Stable, predictable funding for municipalities is essential, and actually I heard about this overwhelmingly so in my visit to Pisano in the past couple of weeks. It's very clear that our elected representatives understand MSI and understand how our municipalities function as well. In addition, for more infrastructure projects, we need to pursue things called P3s, public-private partnerships. These allow us to use the market to invest in critical infrastructure that would benefit taxpayers.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to government accountability with a focus on fiscal policy. What are your provincial budget priorities, and what fiscal policies would your party seek to implement in the budget and through service delivery? We're going to start off with candidate Glasgow.
So our fiscal policy is very well worked and costed once again. We plan to balance the budget by 2022 to 2023. Right now we know that Alberta is facing a debt wall of $100 billion by 2023 if the NDP see another term. That is on the backs of our kids and grandkids. That's on the backs of you and me to pay that off. That averages out to about $89,000 per family at that rate. Just for reference, the amount of interest that you pay on a debt that large is actually enough for 17 out of 21 government departments. Let that sink in. In addition, as far as fiscal accountability goes, we have a great team of candidates with diverse backgrounds who have hands-on experience in this, and we'll be consulting experts just as we have been with our fully costed plan.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
The NDP have promised to have the balanced budget by 23-24. Remember, they came into power in 2015, and there was a big hole in the province. They have worked their way through it. We've had low oil prices, and the previous government had relied so heavily on those oil prices to get things done. And then they spent money unwisely. They just put it down the drain. And I think that Rachel has brought us through that recession. We're starting to see a turnaround in our economy. We're starting to see things moving forward. I also feel that there has been a lot more investment into this province, especially in the renewable energy sector. We've got investment from Japan. We've got investment from the European Union, a lot of countries there. We've got quite a bit happening, and I think we cannot deny that. We are going to have to, it's going to be
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
So I think we need to recognize that to fix the problems in Alberta right now, it took us some time to get into this, and it's going to take us some time to get out of it. I would not support anything that would be abrupt in people's lives. I do believe that what we can do is with a spending freeze, with the ability to fund choke points, to fund priorities that suddenly come up. I believe any government needs the right to do that, but not to go out and make major spending initiatives. I believe that with a spending freeze, with attrition, within a reasonable period of time, we can start to get our fiscal balance back into where it needs to be. We need to work on the revenue side of this equation, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard what I said about Confederation and the fact that the federal government has the authority to approve pipelines, and that is significant revenue that we're foregoing. At the end of the day, we've got to work at it both from the expense side and the revenue side, and we've got to be tenacious, and we've got to be prepared to do what's necessary to make that happen. What it comes down to is we obviously have an overblown public service, but again, I wouldn't support abruptness. Attrition will work just fine.
Candidate Black.
Well, one of the things that I'm quite proud of for our party is that we're the only party in opposition that's posted a budget every year for the last 3 years. So when you go onto our website, if you want to know where we stand on something like education, look at the budget. As I mentioned earlier, we have this plan to support small business in every way we possibly can. I think when I was with the health board, there's issues that I didn't fully understand, and one of them was long-term care. And there's a lady in this audience that will tell you I used to carry around a document that helped explain to me how long-term care worked. I see the Chamber has this beautiful document called Prosperity, and within that there's a whole range of ideas that a government could use to help build business in this province, to find the regulations that are in the way, and work to support getting those out of the way of business so they can move forward. build business, build jobs, build diversity, and I think that's the best way we can move forward in this province, is to turn to business and have them help us find the answer.
Thank you, candidates. Is there interest in opening this up to debate? Yes, I only see 2 hands up. What about the 2 candidates at this end?
Sure, I'm fine.
You're interested? Okay. So we're going to start off, and again, 30 seconds on the countdown clock. Candidate Glasgow, you're first up.
You know, when I hear that the NDP are going to try to balance the budget, I just think that's more fairy tales that we're selling to Albertans. The NDP they promised to balance the budget by 2018. It is now 2019, and we are nowhere near balance. Like I said, interest payments are through the roof, and that's on you and your kids and grandkids to pay that back. Our entire platform is about reigniting the economy and making sure that we can balance the budget. So if you're looking for somebody to look to on fiscal policy, look no further than United Conservatives.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
The NDP have been doing strategic spending in this province, spending on things that affect you and me. When they first came into power, they got rid of a lot of the redundancy in the agencies, boards, and commissions. They stopped paying for these people, the executives of these agency, boards, and commissions. They stopped paying for their membership golf fees. We've also brought down the budget $1.9 billion since the 2018
Thank
budget.
you. Candidate Beasley.
Yeah, I had something come across my desk the other day, and I promise you, if I get elected, I'm never going to forget this, and I'm never going to let any of my associates in the Legislative Assembly forget it. Government money is taxpayers' money. At the end of the day, anything that takes money out of your pocket is taking money out of your pocket. I will not support any ratepayer subsidies for anything. If wind and solar is somehow a feel-good thing for the NDP and it costs us all on our monthly power bill, I will not support that. I will be tireless in ensuring...
Thank you. Candidate Black.
I think... Sorry, Tom.
Candidate Black, I'll start your time again.
Thanks. I think going back to the idea of supporting business and allowing them to innovate and improvise and provide jobs within the community, I think the government has an obligation to support initiatives in business. I don't think a government should be getting in the way of business. One of the things I've learned in talking to people about Bill 69 in particular is how nebulous it is. There's nothing there that tells industry what the rules are, and until you tell industry what the rules are, you're not going to have the industry move forward in a file like the pipelines.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
Our budget is in shambles. There's no way around it. Like I said, we spend more on 17 out of 21 government departments. That's how much we spend in interest every year. And when we're talking about reinvesting in our economy, that's money that's not spent on education. That's money that's not spent on healthcare. That's money that's going to wealthy bankers and bondholders. So the NDP, who claims to be the government of the little guy, is actually emboldening and lining the pockets of some of the biggest people in the world. So to me, that is just an absolute hypocrisy, and I can't believe that we're still hearing this.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
Well, as you can imagine, I disagree with what I just heard. The NDP have cut a lot of fat out of the government right now. And as I was saying at the end of my last 30 seconds, we have reduced the deficit or the debt by $1.9 billion since the 2018 budget projections. So that's $1.9 billion. So we are slowly working towards getting to a balanced budget.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
So some people are concerned about vote splitting in this area, that somehow 2 Conservative candidates are going to lead to an NDP candidate coming up the middle. Has there been anything tonight that you've heard from the NDP candidate that resonates with you? Is there anything that you're willing to go along with, folks? I tell you, all I'm hearing is fairy tales. I'm hearing projections that there's no hope in heck that they're going to reach it. All they've done is cause devastation to our society. They do not have a policy or anything that resonates with the people in Brooks Medicine Hat. That is the bottom line.
Thank you. Candidate Black.
I'm going to beat this to death, as I think that if you're going to make a difference in this economy, you've got to give incentive to small business, medium-sized business, so they can build jobs. To me, it's that simple. I know some people would like to complicate it more than that, but from the point of view of our party, our leader has said our motivation for the economy going forward is to create jobs, jobs, jobs.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to stay on the topic of government accountability, but we're going to switch to a focus on effective representation. If the majority of your constituents feel differently about an issue than your party, how will you effectively represent your constituencies constituents while serving your party. And we're going to start off with candidate McWilliam.
If I was elected to be the representative for Brooks Medicine Hat, I will work in consultation with the people of the riding. I will have been elected. If I am elected, it will be on the NDP policy and the NDP platform. So that will be my first objective. But I will certainly listen, and I will certainly try and influence decision making in Edmonton. I've always done that. I've worked for many members of parliament. I've worked for, even here in Alberta, I worked for one of the new MLAs. And you listen to people, you listen to your constituents, and you bring those issues forward. Even on the doorsteps these last little while, I was talking to a couple, he hasn't been working for a year, and because he was a trucker of oil and gas, and I listened to him, and you know, that's what you have to do, and I'm hoping that I can maybe influence the government in some of the decisions they make.
Thank you. Candidate Black.
Well, as I said earlier, one of the things that attracted me to the Alberta Party at my age, I'm sitting up here running for politics, is the fact that it's a party that does believe in local decisions. It believes in listening to constituents and taking their ideas up the line. We don't have a party whip. We don't have anybody telling us what to say and do. We're expected to listen to the community. One of the reasons we changed our focus on the carbon levy is because we were hearing from people that at this environment and this time and this economy, this is what we should be doing. So we withdrew that from our platform. In the last election, I disagreed with the leader twice. I mean, that was perfectly acceptable within our party. Already in this election, I've disagreed with the leader 3 times because his position on items, on issues has not been what I've been hearing at the doors here in Brooks Medicine Hat. And so I'm supporting the people that live here and supporting their decisions going up the line. I think if you have a party that takes ideas up the line and they build things around the table together, you come up with better ideas for everyone, not just one ideology or the other.
Okay, candidate Glasgow.
Effective representation is extremely important, and that's why I fundamentally believe that Brooks Medicine Hat deserves a seat at the table in this government. As far as vote splitting is concerned, in Medicine Hat, we had an NDP MLA for the past 4 years. So when I'm on the doorsteps, all I hear is, we can't do that again, Michaela. How do we make sure that that happens? And the way that we make sure that happens is by having strong local candidates, which I know that I am. So when we're talking about a seat at the table, we need a meaningful way to interact. I've been working with our Southern Alberta candidates and also our leader, Jason Kenney, to make sure that he recognizes my potential. And he did, because he asked me to run. This is an opportunity for us here to have a seat at the table, to communicate those concerns to government. Just this past week, we have candidate calls every morning to talk about the issues in the ridings. And we can bring up our concerns there, and it's actually impacted our platform in its creation. So I know that it's, with the promise or hope of a UCP government coming in, the best way for us to have that is a seat at the table.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
I fully expect to be able to go along with 95% of what the UCP is going to propose. A vote for me is a vote for the UCP. What I get to do, and this is a huge advantage, and this is the biggest advantage of any candidate that's sitting before you today, is when they step outside of conservative values, I get to speak my mind. I've had a conversation with the former Solicitor General of Alberta, and I asked him, what are my rights as an independent? I have more rights as an independent in terms of being able to participate in all committee work. At the end of the day, I will have the opportunity to address the Legislative Assembly once a week. But the biggest advantage, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm not whipped. If there's legislation that is favoring the City of Calgary or the City of Edmonton or any of the larger metropolitan areas, I referenced the Green Line, I don't have to go along with it, and I'm not under fear of censure or somehow being in a position that I'm going to be booted out of caucus. I can speak my mind, I can speak for this constituency, and with 38 years of business experience and science excellence, I promise you I will.
Thank you. Moving on to government accountability, and this time the subtopic is engagement. As a candidate, you're elected to represent your constituents. How will you commit to engaging citizens within your riding in order to represent varying viewpoints, and how would you address opposing perspectives? I'm going to start off with candidate Black.
Well, I was elected by the teachers of Southeast Alberta to be their representative in Edmonton, and that territory took from Consort to Bassano to foremost to the border. And one of the things I did to make sure I was engaged properly with teachers, I visited every small school once a semester to get their ideas about issues that were facing the ATA. So my background is that my preferred style is to talk to people, hear what their ideas are, make sure I'm accessible to them, make sure I'm available within 24 hours of a phone call to take their concerns forward. The role of an MLA is very similar. I mean, in this particular new constituency, we're very, very diverse, from Scandia to Bassano to Medicine Hat. So you have to make sure you're available. You'll need to have a campaign or a constituency office in both ridings. You're going to need to make sure you're available. My background and my track record has said that I am that. I was that way when I was sitting on the Palliser Health Board. We were always accessible, and that's my style.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
So at the end of the day, I work for you. I'm standing before you today. I'm applying for a job. I'm asking you to support me. At the end of the day, I would be your servant, and I mean that. I would absolutely engage. I would be available. My phone number's published on my campaign site, and I make it clear, phone's always on. You call me. If you need me, I will be available. Don't ask me to deliver your groceries, but at the end of the day, if there's something that you need help with, I promise you will get reaction out of me. I intend to have offices in Medicine Hat, Bassano, and Brooks. At the end of the day, my record shows that I've enjoyed engagement. I enjoy perspective. Sometimes I can't agree with people. At the end of the day, we have to choose what's best for the collectiveness in this riding. But again, as an unwhipped candidate, I get to bring your voice to the Legislative Assembly as opposed to the desires of a party and a whipped candidate back to you and trying to defend that. I believe that's of significant advantage to the people in Brooks Medicine Hat, and I believe I will be much more effective as your representative.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
There's always going to be a bit of contention when the government is putting forward some platforms and some ideas that are not exactly going to work with everybody. And a good example of that is Bill 6. The rollout of Bill 6 was quite disastrous, but the NDP listened. They listened to people. They worked with the Alberta Farmers Association and the Alberta Beef Association to make it right. And Lynn Jacobson, you may have read it in the Medicine Hat publication in the news, they don't want that to change. They've worked on it. It's not a perfect piece of legislation, but they worked on it. And that's what we have to do. If there's issues, you have to discuss it. You have to talk about it, and you have to try and find a compromise that will make things work for everybody. And you can't just be one issue. You've got to work on everything. And the constituency is full of a lot of diverse people. So you've got...
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
Well, I'd just like to start off by saying thank you to my candidate to my left here for acknowledging that Bill 6 was a monumental disaster, because we sure haven't heard that before. We have, as far as engagement is concerned, the best way to know what people are talking about is by meeting them at their doors. And that's exactly what I've been doing for the past year. I started my nomination process a little bit early so that I could make sure that I met as many people as possible. And during this campaign, I make no exception. Like I said, we're on the doors up to 6 hours a day most days. And we're hearing from a diverse range of people in different areas. I was in Scandia yesterday, Bassano 2 weeks ago, Rosemary before that, Medicine Hat, Redcliffe, you name it, Brooks. I try to divide my time as well as possible because this is a large riding and the needs are diverse. As far as what we can do further, we can employ technology. There's things like Facebook Live, video conferencing to make sure that you can be in 20 places at once. We have wonderful staff members and people who we can employ to go to things on our behalves and make sure that that your voices are ultimately heard. But that's not going to happen unless you have a seat at the table.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to stay on the point about government accountability, but now we're going to move into vision. As a chamber, the Medicine Hat District Chamber of Commerce has been committed to being a positive and forward-looking organization for over 100 years. Projecting into the future and thinking long-term, what does your ideal Alberta look like in 50 years? We're going to start off with candidate Beasley.
Well, as an entrepreneur, I've built businesses that I literally started in my garage, and they are now on 5 of the world's continents. I understand the motivation of developing things and ultimately taking those forward and turning them into great success stories. I believe that if we can create the circumstances, the tax circumstances, the ability to put those that need with those that can, at the end of the day, great things can come from our society. We must have vision. We must have a competitive economy. When Ralph Klein used to talk about the Alberta advantage, and I'm out of time.
No, you got another 30
sorry,
seconds.
okay. When Ralph Klein talked about the Alberta Advantage, he was referring to the entrepreneurial nature of our society. We were highly, highly educated, but he also referred to the fact that we had the cheapest energy costs in the North American grid. Our power was 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Our natural gas was cheap. It gave entrepreneurs the ability to have confidence in making investment. Those investments ultimately put people to work in good paying jobs. We must fight for a competitive society. I will.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow, 60 seconds.
Our vision for Alberta is right in the high points of our platform, and that is reigniting our economy, restoring the Alberta Advantage, and making sure that we're building an Alberta that's strong and free. Now, what exactly does strong and free mean? To me, strong and free means being a leader in Canada. We've been used as a doormat for Ottawa for way too long, and we need to make sure that Ottawa knows that we have a place and it's distinct within our confederation. I wouldn't say that our confederation is broken, but we can definitely do things to improve that, and that's by having strong premiers, strong leadership, and strong candidates and strong MLAs to be able to advocate for the issues that matter here. 50 years from now, I want to see a bustling economy. We know that our reliance on oil and gas is not going anywhere, so we need to embolden that sector as well as the next generation to be able to take steps, innovate, and make sure that we have this ability to go forward.
Thank you. Candidate Black.
Well, looking 50 years down the road, I want a community that's a safe and caring community where everybody's accepted for who they are and what they can contribute to the society. I want to see a society that's not dependent upon one resource. I want to see a society that's diverse, where there's business opportunities for all, where there's educational opportunities for all. I want to see a community where we all pull together as Albertans and as part of Canada. I want to see a public healthcare system that's viable and accessible to all. And I want to see the best public education system available in the world. I think there's best models out there that we can take a look at. We have a great system, we have a great opportunity, but we are not quite as diverse as some of the economies like Finland that treats an economy that's based on the individual needs of students and let them build their potential, allow them to be their own persons and to meet their maximum potential. That's the Canada I want to see, and that's the Alberta I want to see 50 years from now.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
In 50 years, I'd like to see a very diverse economy as well. I know that oil and gas is our backbone to our province as well as our country, but we also have to diverse. We cannot rely on it solely. I also want to see a well-educated population. I want to ensure that everybody has an education and is able to move forward. I want good health through good health facilities. I want to have an inclusive society where people are not going to be left behind. Everybody will be moving forward, and we can move forward. I don't want us to be moving backwards.
Thank you. Okay, so we encourage the public to submit questions through our website prior to the forums. So here's the first question. What is your party's stance on supervised consumption sites? I'll start with candidate Glasgow.
The drug injection sites in Medicine Hat have been a very contentious point here in the city. We recognize that harm reduction is a strategy that some use, but we ultimately believe that the consultation process has not been thorough enough. I was happy to sit in a room with over 200 concerned Medicine Hatters downtown at the Beverage Building, and the message there was loud and clear. This is an issue that brings forth passion. It's an issue that we need to use our compassion and our humanity to solve, but at the same time, we also need to look for practical solutions. So one of those solutions is making sure that we're consulting with municipalities, not thrusting these injection sites upon them, as well as making sure that the municipalities know that they have recourse and a way to communicate with government. And we've made that very clear that we will open that door for them.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
I was with some students this morning, and one of the questions was about the injection site here in Medicine Hat. Why are we spending money on people that shoot up? Why are we spending money who are addicted to whatever drug? And I said, okay, are we not going to spend money for people who smoke? They also have a lot of issues, health issues down the road. Are we going to put them aside as well? I think it's important that we have a safe place for people to go and inject. There are nurses going to be there for them, and there are counselors going to be there for them. And every time that person goes into that site, they are going to be bombarded by a counselor to try and get them off their addiction. And they will eventually, after 50, 60 times of going into this site, it'll finally sink in, yes, it's time for me to quit this. And they'll have the ability to go to another area and get the counseling and the help that they need. We cannot let these people go.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley.
Well, I got to say, what jumps out at me is what I've said earlier. We've got to look after the weakest members of our society, but I'm not making excuses for this problem. Anybody that deals these drugs in our society needs to face the full extent of our law. I'm not talking a spank on the behind. I'm talking about serious jail time. People need to know that if you bring this into our community and you cause harms to our people, there's going to be significant consequences to this. We've got to help those that need it. At the end of the day, I agree that we must have people there that in these perhaps locations that there's support for them, but we've got to be very, very cognizant of the people that are living around these areas. In the city of Calgary, there's been massive reductions in property values. There's been significant increases in crime. I'm not interested in seeing a police officer on the corner watching somebody dealing misery to somebody that is out of their mind. I want consequences in our society, and I want a justice system that is going to take that into account and get this scum out of our society.
Thank you. Candidate Black.
Well, I can speak to this issue as a former police officer, and I can tell you there's nothing more difficult than dealing with somebody who is high on drugs. It's a challenge and I don't care how strong you are as an individual, it's a challenge. My experience as a police officer was that when people self-medicate on drugs, it's a symptom of a deeper problem. And those deeper problems tend to be mental health issues. For whatever the reason are, and each individual is different, but there's mental health issues at the basis of almost all these cases. My take on this is that, and I understand there was a lack of consultation, and I'm not going to get into that because I wasn't part of that. But until you start to deal with the mental health issues that lead to this epidemic, that lead people to self-medicate, all you're doing is what we used to call in the health board is you're jumping in and saving people in the river without going upstream to find out what the problem is. Why are they jumping in the first place? And so until we spend some funds up the river dealing with mental health issues, this is going to be a problem for a while.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to some audience questions that were submitted. The first question, what will your party do to eliminate the provincial debt? And we're going to start off with Candidate Black first.
Well, again, I'd like to refer you to our website. We've been saying this now for 3 years. We put together a plan to deal with the deficit over the term till 2023. It's there for everybody to take a look at. We want to incentivize small business to create more jobs. We want to be a part of a government that decreases regulations that's interfering with the creation of jobs in small business. My particular concern, particularly since I've educated myself towards this issue, is rural Alberta. It's agribusiness. They're under tremendous stress right now. One of the most emotional moments for me in this election was at the Brooks Forum on Monday night. A young man came up to me, 18, 19 years old. He had tears in his eyes. He was concerned about the suicide rate that's taking place in rural Alberta right now, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. And it's directly related, in his point of view, to the stresses that come from the financial challenges of ag business here in Alberta, and that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Candidate Beasley?
So I don't think that there's any overstating the threat to compound interest on the debt that the NDP has put onto this province. We were once debt-free. What it is, it's a direct threat to our ability to fund society, to fund services, to fund priority issues. We're talking about healthcare, we're talking about education. We got to get our debt under control, and I believe that it needs to be job one, but I cannot advocate abruptness. I have to say this again. It took us a while to get into this. We have to have patience. It's going to take us a while to get out of it. What we need to do is we need to recognize that our public service is bloated. We need to consider attrition to allow that to come back into line in terms of what we need. I agree with what Jim just said. I got my truck broke into at 30 below last winter, and all I could think of is what kind of life is somebody living that they're breaking into vehicles at 30 below, stealing things out of my vehicle. By golly, it told me that the economy is creating poverty and misery, and with poverty and misery, we have crime and despair. We've got to get our economy working. All boats rise with the tide.
Candidate McWilliam.
Well, again, the province is working on encouraging investment in this province to create jobs. We are also, it's coming from outside of Canada. We've got a lot of investment happening. We are going to continue to go that path because that's the only way that we are going to get people back to work. It's the only way that we are going to eliminate the debt. We've already cleaned out a lot of the fat in the public service. I don't think that we're going to be able to do much more than that. We will strategically spend money on healthcare, education, seniors, children. We've got our $25 a day daycare happening now, and we're going to expand that. And that's going to be an economic development boost because it's going to allow more people to get out into the economy and work. And it's been a proven thing in Ontario and Quebec. So we can continue to do that. We will get the economy going.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
Eliminating the debt is something that I have touched on a couple times, so I'm going to reiterate it once again just so it sinks in. We plan to eliminate the debt by deficit by 2022-2023. The debt that we are accumulating in Alberta does not help anyone, and it further burdens our next generation. We're going to grow our economy. By growing our economy, employing things such as red tape reduction strategies, we're declaring Alberta open for business. We know that this is a problem here, as we have similar economies in Oklahoma, Texas, and other places that are booming right now with similar resource structures. The only reason that we are not in the same position is because we have a provincial government and a federal government who is determined to stand in the way of our own success. Now, how can we do that? We can elect a government that is focused on bold and decisive action to get our economy back on track, restore the Alberta advantage, and make us the most competitive place to do business in the world.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to ask a second question from the floor. What would your government view as your #1 priority for agriculture in Alberta, and what would you do to support that priority? We're going to start off with candidate Beasley first.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm working with Centre for Crop Diversification just south of the Medicine Hat College in Brooks. We've got a joint venture between Alberta Agriculture and Nevada Agriculture. We're bringing in new high-value strains that we will propagate, we will get on the cultivar list, and these are strains that we'll bring back to our ag community that ultimately we're going to be able to provide significantly higher value for those farmers that are growing crops. We believe that some of these strains are going to triple the revenue of some of our farmers. We also at the same time have to recognize that we've got some existential threats in our waterways that we need to deal with. The invasive species of the zebra mussel is on our borders. If this gets into our irrigation system, ladies and gentlemen, we're in trouble. We need politicians who understand that. We need politicians that can fight and go ahead and get the resources federally, locally, and provincially. One other thing, I really like the Meridian Dam project. Whoever gets in down here, I would absolutely consider working with them, and what I would hope to achieve is more forward momentum on that.
Thank you. Candidate Glasgow.
We listen to our agriculture community very, very often within the United Conservatives, and we have found out that Bill 6 is one of the most onerous pieces of legislation. It undermined the social fabric of our province by taking an adversarial role with our family farms. I remember when I was going to school in Lethbridge pursuing my degree, you were always following farm equipment. That wasn't really anything new on the number 3 highway, but what we did notice was that there was an abundance of farm equipment that one day. That was people, grassroots action, going from Lethbridge to Edmonton to advocate against Bill 6. So we have advocated for Bill 3 of the United Conservative Government to axe Bill 6. That means that we would make it so that farmers are not obligated to provide WCB, but they can provide private insurance, which actually protects workers around the clock, including their families. We also know that we have an issue with Justin Trudeau right now and his inability to get anything done on the canola file, which I would touch more on later with the opportunity.
Thank you. Candidate Black.
As we talked about earlier, I think one of the things I was hearing in the ag community is that there is a concern about water security, and I think Todd's touched on that. They didn't talk about invasive species, but they talked about global warming and the impact it's going to have on our environment here, from their perspective at least. So I also am in favor of taking a long, strong look at the development of the Meridian Dam. I think that conversation's been out here for a number of years now, but it might be the time to start discussing that, particularly when they're looking at mitigation projects upriver from us so that we don't experience another 2013 here in Medicine Hat. But again, I want to go back to the concept of we got to maintain funding for infrastructure here in the province, because they have a genuine concern about the deterioration of bridges in these rural highways. And there's something like in the county of Taber alone, there's 160 bridges that are in need of repair, and we've got to maintain funding for those. And I think that's one of the things that you can do through the MSI funding, by maintaining it so they can maintain their infrastructure.
Thank you, candidate McWilliam.
The NDP is, in our platform, we're talking about working with lenders to allow farmers to receive funding for non-traditional crops and livestock. And one of the things that is non-traditional is hemp. As you know, it's one of the fastest growing plants in the world. It's second to bamboo. It has a multiple of uses. There are businesses that are being created, like in Vegreville, there's already a production plant there. And now in Bow Island, they're considering putting up a production plant as well. Right now, hemp is being shipped over to Manitoba with the company Hempco, and things are being produced from that. The other thing that is being done is the AFA, Lynn Jacobson from the Alberta Federation of Agriculture, she has said that in that newspaper article that I referred to earlier, that UCP have not even consulted with them on their platform on agriculture.
Thank you. Okay, so this is my personal favorite question, okay?
I can hardly wait.
Grant me one. I refer to this as the mother always told me if I couldn't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, okay? So guide your answers by this. As a chamber, we are a solution-driven organization through the various recommendations we propose. We may not always align with government policies, but we always seek out viable solutions regardless of whether we have opposing viewpoints. In the spirit of collaboration, tell us which policy or recommendation from an opposing party's platform you would consider implementing and why. Just perfect, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to start off with Councillor Glasgow. Candidate Glasgow. I'm used to it's getting towards the end, folks. There's going to be some screw-ups sometime.
It's okay.
Candidate Glasgow.
You know, I've actually grown a lot of appreciation for Jim's comments tonight, and particularly his comment on the freedom to represent his constituents. And I think that that's a really good thing to note. And I know that this is actually mirrored in our United Conservative Party as well, with the free votes on matters of conscience, which I know is extremely important, because we do have personally held beliefs that are integral to our society, and we should be able to exercise those freely. So I guess kudos to the Alberta Party for recognizing that as well, and that is my policy.
Thank you. Candidate McWilliam.
I have to agree with Jim, especially with his healthcare initiatives and his discussions that he's had on healthcare. I think that he has brought forward a lot of good ideas, and I think that we can work on that.
Great. Candidate Beasley.
Well, I guess I'm in an enviable position. I've said that although I'm an independent conservative, at the end of the day, I fully intend to support 95+% of what the UCP's policies are. But since I am as an independent, I get to say I really like their positions on rural crime. I really like their positions on a reduction in corporate taxes. If we look at any jurisdiction around the world, that has paid enormous dividends for society in terms of people going back to work with decent, meaningful jobs. I really like Mr. Kenney's idea on debt reduction.
Candidate Black.
Well, I kind of like the idea that Michaela brought up about a Ministry of Regulations, because I've heard time and time again, particularly in rural Alberta, how regulations tend to get in the way of business, and it tends to get in the way of their bottom line. So I certainly could support that. I've sat up here and I've kind of complained about going to a central body with healthcare. One of the good things that came out of that was that we had a consolidated, centralized program to recruit doctors. They did it for Southeast. We couldn't do it alone, and so that was a good idea on the part of government.
Good, thanks. Now, wasn't that a positive way to end the debate part of it?
Right on.
We're done.
Yeah, I think so. How about joining me? These candidates have stuck to the time, a personal bugbear of mine. They've really put themselves out there. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to get into the wrap-up tonight, and we're going to be speaking in reverse order from the opening statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes, and we'll begin with the closing statement from candidate McWilliams.
First, I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for putting on this debate, and I want to thank my fellow candidates for attending as well. I think it's been a very vibrant and lively debate here tonight. I also want to encourage all of you to go out and make sure you vote. Vote, I don't care who you vote for, but we must ensure that everybody votes and get family and friends out there as well voting. I also feel that we've got to one of the things that is very deep in my heart is that the trust. And who do you trust? Rachel Notley has worked hard for this province. She has fought for Alberta and she has fought for Albertans. She has brought in Bill 12, which is the prosperity for Canadian economic prosperity, which would allow us Alberta to shut down our oil and gas to leave the province. She has really worked hard on that. She is fighting for Alberta. She's fighting for our industry. She's fighting to keep things going. And I want you to know that she will continue to do that. She will continue to move our province forward. Or you can also trust a guy who cheated to become leader of his party and lied about it after he was caught. I think that is something that has to be considered.
Okay, candidate Glasgow.
So I also want to thank the Chamber and everybody for coming here tonight, and also my exceptional team of volunteers who's come out to support me. I couldn't do this without you. We need to acknowledge that I think one thing we learn as a family, and I know I learned from my family, is we should always try to leave things better than when we found them. 4 years ago, when the NDP got in, can you honestly sit in this audience and say that things are better now than they were 4 years ago? We're looking at $100 million in debt. We're looking at a massive influx of unemployment in our province. We're looking at major problems that somebody else has to solve that we're putting on the backs of everyday people and our kids and grandkids. I was very happy to be part of the team that united our Conservative family. We had over 95% support for unity, and most of that was down here in Southern Alberta. You guys worked your tails off. You sold memberships. You got involved. That's fantastic. That's proof that organic initiative trumps anything else. And I was proud to be a part of that too. But what I'll leave you with is the fact that we have to be very cognizant of the fact that we could fracture that family again. In Brooks Medicine Hat, we have an opportunity to have a seat at the table. I've said this before, but you do need to know that this seat at the table is more than symbolic. It's more than question period. It's more than having 1 day a week to ask a question. It's about being truly representative of the people in this riding and their diverse needs. You need an MLA that's responsive. You need an MLA that is ready to handle this job, and you need an MLA that's ready to lead. As part of Jason Kenney's team, I know that I am confident in his platform, his ability to speak to everyday people, and also our ability to get Alberta back on track. So if you're like me and you think that we need a change in this election, I would hope that I can earn your support. I know that I'm not entitled to it. I know that we have a bunch of people in this room who've been a part of our team, but that doesn't mean anything. And I know that I want to earn your support, which is why we'll continue to door knock, and I hope I meet you at the doors.
Thank you. Candidate Black.
I think everybody in this room has one thing in common, and what you're here to do is you're going to hire an employee with your vote to represent you in Edmonton. And obviously I wouldn't be sitting up here if I didn't want to be one of those individuals. I think by now you know where I stand in terms of things about supporting small business. If you've taken the time to look at our website, I'm very proud of the fact that we've posted a budget every year. We're upfront, we're transparent, we're not reacting to a moment. We've put together a plan long term, and it's there for all of you to see. But I want to change tack just a little bit here, because we've talked about representation, how you represent your area. I sat on the ATA's political engagement committee for about 9 years, and I've met lots of politicians. I've met lots of MLAs, and I want to make something clear before this audience. We have here in Medicine Hat, regardless of what you think of their political points of view, we have two of the hardest working MLAs I've ever come across in all the years I worked with the AT on political engagement when we were dealing with the pension liability. Bob Warner and Drew Barnes are as hard a working MLAs as there is in the province. They're approachable, they're accountable, they get back to you. You may disagree with their political points of view, but they are hardworking individuals and they're role models for whoever you choose up here to follow in their footsteps. That's the template that's been set. I applaud both of them. I don't agree fully with all of their points of view, but I respect the fact that they're accountable. They're two of the hardest working people you can possibly ever meet, irrespective of whether they're MLAs or not. And so that's the standard you want to hold us accountable to, is the standard that they've already set for all of us.
And finally, Candidate Beasley, your closing comments.
Ladies and gentlemen, it would be absolutely my honor if you take a hard look at my candidacy. You know, when it comes down to it, I've got, as I said earlier, 38 years of experience. I've got 38 years of significant accomplishment for our society. I've got a resume that I could sit here for the next half hour. I've been cited for bravery by His Royal Highness Prince Philip. I'm on the Wall of Fame at my local high school. I've got 20 approximate patents, method and apparatus for technologies that I've created. I can add significant value to the Energy Ministry, to the Environment Ministry, to the Science and Innovation Ministry, to the Electricity and Renewables Ministry, to the Agriculture Ministry. At the end of the day, before I began this journey, what I was not interested in being is a backbencher, sitting on the backbench of the legislature as an independent who couldn't do a darn thing. I went to the former Solicitor General of Alberta and I asked him a very simple question. How can I be effective? What are my rights? And what can I tell people in the audience when they ask me this question? So as an independent candidate, a conservative candidate who fully intends to support the UCP party, I'll say it again, a vote for me is a vote for Mr. Kenney. But what I get to do is I get to support them when they are advancing conservative causes, causes that are important to the people in Brooks Medicine Hat. When they step outside of conservative values, I get to speak my mind. When they step outside of legislation that favors the cities and does not favor our area, I get to speak my mind. I'm not whipped. At the end of the day, that is of huge advantage to this area. I could sit here for the next 5 minutes talking about what I hope to achieve. What I will say is this: it would be my honor if you came out to see me. I'll be speaking next week at the Elks Hall on the 10th, 7 o'clock. It would be my honor if you went to my Facebook page. I did a Facebook Live event. Over 3,900 people watched that. It's a who I am, what I stand for, what do I hope to achieve video. My phone number is 403-830-1840. It's always on. Call me. I'd be delighted to talk to you and get to know you.
I'm really glad I didn't have to cut you off in the middle of your phone number. Okay, so candidates, I got to tell you, it shows a lot of spirit and a lot of guts to stand up here, say what you stand for, put yourself out on the line, and I have ultimate personal respect for you. And I would like the audience to join me in thanking the candidates one more time. And as with all chamber meetings, we start on time, we end on time. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll conclude our event tonight. But before you leave, I'd like to bring back Sarah Mackenzie, President of the Chamber of Commerce, to say a few words.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you to all of our candidates for being here this evening and being brave in putting your name forward and running for this. I think it's how fortunate are we to be Canadian, to be Albertan, and to be able to live in this democracy of a country. Not everyone is as fortunate as we are. So thank you, everybody, and let's give Ken a round of applause for all that he has done this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank you for attending tonight's forum for Brooks Medicine Hat. We acknowledge that it takes a significant amount of time and effort for the candidates to allow their name to stand. So I'd like, oh, we just did this, sorry, I'm gonna skip down. Due to our limited time, we recognize that not all the questions of the Chamber nor the public could possibly all be addressed during the forum. However, the Chamber has sent a questionnaire to all candidates prior to the forum and will also be sending a questionnaire following the forums with any additional questions submitted. If we didn't get to your questions or the forum tonight spurred additional questions, please feel free to submit them on our website. Pertinent questions that are addressed to all candidates will be forwarded to the candidates and their replies will be posted on our Vote Prosperity page. If you're interested in spending more time with Ken, I'd like to take this time to mention that tomorrow we'll be hosting a lunch and learn at the Medicine Hat Golf and Country Club, where we'll be discussing specifically our Vote Prosperity platform. You can also visit our website to register for that. We would like to thank the Medicine Hat Lodge for generously providing Ken's accommodation during this time. I would like to acknowledge the staff and the Chamber of Commerce for organizing tonight's event, as well as the members of our Board of Directors for their role in bringing tonight's event. Chat TV live streamed our forum tonight and it will be available on their website. The Chamber will also link the forum videos to our Vote Prosperity page. We hope that this forum has been useful in identifying your choice for our future representative in Edmonton. In closing, I would like to take this final opportunity to remind everyone to cast your ballot in the advance polls April 9th through 13th or on Election Day on April 16th. For more information or questions on where you need to go to vote, please visit Elections Alberta or electionsab.ca. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and please feel free to join the candidates out in the lobby for the next half hour. Good night.